This is a deep dive of File Locker. We have the account. It'll automatically pull up your account from MetaMask, but if it does not, you can click this button here, which will populate this account here. We have a certain number of pre-initiated files here. We have 2. Here in the temp owner and the true owner, they're both the same, which is my account up here. And we can view these because we are the temporary owner and the true owner. You only have to be one in order to view it, which we'll get to later. Let's try and view file number 1. There it is. You can see the contents are file 1, classified information. Obviously, you can put in whatever you want for the contents. We'll put lorem ipsum here. We try and view file 3, doesn't exist, won't let me. So let's create file 3. Let's call it hi. Make the contents something. Submit. Here we have the MetaMask pop up with the total amount of ETH that we're going to be spending. We're going to just click confirm here to complete the transaction. We can see it automatically refreshes. So we have file 3, and since I created it, I am the temporary owner and the true owner, of course. Let's try and view it now. So we're going to put in file 3, hit submit, and here it is, something. There it is. All right, let's do something interesting and lend it out. If I go into files here, I have another account here that I've been using. All right, that'll be the recipient. The file itself is file 3, and the lend key, just the way I've set it up for now, is the same. So we'll just do it submit. We'll lend it to that account there and confirm it. All right, so as we see in the table, the temporary owner is now that account. So if we try and view it, we still can, because we're the true owner. We only have to be one of these, as I said before. So try and view the file, and it'll say something. There it is. It'll work. Let's try and give away the file now. So let's just do the right things there. I still have that copied. Let's do that. Confirm. Now the temporary owner and the true owner are both that account, not mine. Let's try and view it. File 3 won't let me. Perfect. So it's working as it should. And also, if it's not my account and temporary owner and true owner are not my accounts, I should not be able to delete it. So let's just say this, and the delete key is just that. Let's see. There, yeah. It won't let me delete the file since I don't have any ownership of it, which is good. Also, if I don't have ownership of it, I shouldn't be able to lend it or give it. So let's just do that again. There we go, giving me an error. It's not letting me do that. Let's try giving it. Perfect, error again. If I want to borrow it, I can just put in the keys there, the file ID, and let's try that again. There it is. It'll let me submit the transaction there to borrow the file. And it'll show up in the table here that I'm the temporary owner, but the true owner is still the same, as it should be, because I'm just borrowing it. Now I can view it again. There it is, something. But I still should not be able to delete it. There it is. Yeah, you have to be true owner in order to delete it. So now, let's go ahead and take the file. Last thing to do. Hang on, take the file. And there it is, confirm. So now it's back to being both my address. So now we can delete it. Show you how that works. Confirm. And it's gone. So it's working as it should. Anything else? Okay, well, here. Let's try and view it again. You shouldn't be able to view it. Yeah, perfect. That should be the last thing. Yeah. It doesn't exist, so obviously you shouldn't be able to view it. You can't. All right. Let's go over the Solidity contract line by line. All right, so we're using Solidity 0.5.16. Just that's what worked with my version of VS Code and Ganesh. So we have our contract. We're creating files. So files.solidity. That's what we're creating. We have two addresses, the owner and the recipient. We saw how the recipient is used functionally and how owner is used. We will talk about that. Here we create a struct. We have a uint for ID, two strings for name and contents, two addresses for temporary owner and the true owner, and then three uints for lend key, trade key, and delete key. We create the mapping with that struct called files. We pass in a uint, and that will get the struct files all here. Here's our uints, lend key, trade key, and delete key, which will be used to create these two files that will be the starter files. So for lend key, we just create it for 1, trade key 2, delete key 3. We have the public ID here, which is just 0. Again, that'll be used for the constructor part. So we have two modifiers as well, only temp owner, which passes in an ID and requires that the message.sender is equal to files and ID.tempOwner. So it's just making sure that the sender is the temporary owner of that file. And the same thing for true owner, except it's just making sure that the sender is the true owner of that file. Here's our constructor, where the owner is set to message.sender, so the person who calls the constructor will be the owner of these two files here, since we're passing in owner for both of the, as we go to the struct here, we can see where that goes. For ID, it's just ID, which is set to 0. Starter file for the name, classified information for contents, the owner for temporary and true owner, as we saw here in this file. And lend key, trade key, and delete key are both, or all three, these values here. And it's the same for the second file. I just wanted two files to start with. Alright, so let's get to our functions. We have view file, which passes in an ID, and it returns a string, some contents, so just the contents of the file. We're requiring that message.sender is either the temporary owner or the true owner of the file, which makes sense. You should only be able to view it if you are the temporary or true owner. And I created just a little event here, which I did skip over that. All right. Yeah, so here's an event where we pass in the address of the viewer, and we're just I was trying to use this as a debugging tool to make sure that the message.sender is actually viewing the file. And we're returning the file contents when we use view file, which, again, we just go here and we can view the file, and that's what it's doing. For add file, we are passing in a name and contents. The ID is the last ID plus 1. Same for the lend key, trade key, and delete key. And we are just the same, passing an ID, name, contents from the function call, and then message.sender, which is good, and our lend, trade, and delete keys. Here we're borrowing a file, so we'll be passing in an ID and the lend key. We're requiring that the lend key is equal to the actual lend key of the file. So whatever this lend key is being, in the call, is equal to the actual lend key. If it's a different key, it should not work, which is how it should be. And we're setting the temporary owner of that file to message.sender. That way, only the temporary owner is being changed in the borrowing. process, which is what separates borrowing from taking, and lending from giving as well. So for the taking part, it's the same with the ID, and this time we're passing in the trade key. So we're requiring that the trade key is equal to the actual trade key, that the trade key that's being passed in is equal to the actual trade key of the file, and we're setting the temporary and true owner of the file to message.sender, which again, as I explained, is the difference between borrow and taking. So here we have lend file, which this time we need a recipient. Since we're not just borrowing or taking it, we're sending it off. So we're going to pass in the ID, the lend key, and a recipient. And we're using the modifier only temporary owner, because only the temporary owner should be able to lend off the file. So we're requiring that the lend key is equal to the actual lend key of the file again, and we are setting the temporary owner to the recipient this time, not message.sender, but the recipient, because we are already the temporary owner, we're trying to lend it to the recipient. So for give file, we have the ID, the trade key, and the recipient, again, being passed in, and we're requiring that the trade key is equal to the actual trade key, which I did skip over this. We are using the modifier only true owner, which makes sense. The true owner should be able to give away the file. Now back to the contents here, we're setting the recipient to the temporary and true owner, which again, makes sense. Here we go, the delete file, the final function here, we're passing in the ID and the delete key, which only the true owner, as I said before, should be able to delete the file. You know, someone who's borrowed the file really shouldn't be able to delete the file. It should only be able to delete it if you are the owner of the file, the true owner. So we're requiring that the delete key is the actual delete key from the file. And then we just simply delete the file. So let's get to the tests. Go ahead and just quit that. Now let's do truffle test, just to give you a quick oversight that this all works. So here we have 11 passing tests, no fails. All right, so let's go through this test by test here. So we have our contract being set up here, and first, we're requiring the artifacts file solidity, which is the contract itself, and then truffle assertions as well, which we'll use later on. The first describe is setting up the contract, which we're creating a new file instance in this for each independent test. Then for this first independent test, we are initializing the correct number of files. All right, so we're just asserting that the file instance ID is equal to 2, since there are 2 that we are initializing in our solidity contract. The next independent test, we are making sure that the files that were initiated actually have the correct values. So here we're going through, remember that struct, we have the first value here is equal to 1, which is the ID. And we can see has the correct ID. The second value, which is 1, has the name, which is starter file. So as we saw, that's the correct name. The third value, 2, is the contents. So classified information has the correct contents. All right, sounds good. And we do the same thing for the second file as well. Now here, I wanted to make sure that there's no third file that's being recognized. So we have the third file here. The first, second, and third values should be, 0 or empty, and it is, so that's good. The second describe here is viewing the file. So now we're going function by function. Again, with our before each, we're creating a new file instance before each independent test. So we are using files instance.viewFile.call, and then we put in our parameters, which would just be 1, which is the ID. And we're making sure that the contents that's being returned from this call is equal to what it should be, which is classified information for ID number 1 and for ID number 2, lorem ipsum, and both tests passed. The second function, which is the adding the files, here with this describe. For the following functions, I won't go over again the before each, since it's the same for all of these describes, but just the independent tests. Here we go and we call add file, and we're passing in hi and bruh, great, name and contents for sure, and we're making sure that the view file is, the contents being returned by the view file is what we said it should be, and that passed. Here's borrowing files. We're calling the borrow file, which is the ID and the lend key. So we pass that in, and we're just making sure that the owner is the actual owner, as it should be, and that passed. So we successfully borrowed the file. Same for taking the file, just we need the take file call with the ID and the trade key. And this successfully passed as well. So the owner is as it should be. For lending files, we have 3 parameters now. As we went over before, we have the ID, we have the lend key, and then we have the recipient. So here's that address there, as we saw in the first test with the npm run dev, so just the localhost web. So we have the owner equaling the owner, as it should be, and we have that being successful. Same with the giving, where we have the 3 parameters, but we have ID, the trade key, and the recipient, and this passes as well. For the last function, we have deleting files. So this time it's a little different. We're first adding the file, and then we are making sure that the contents are what they should be as before. But this time, now that we've added the file, we're going to delete it. So we have the ID and the delete key. And then I use truffle assert because it should fail, and it does. So this test passed because we got this reversion error, VM exception while processing transaction revert, as it should have done, because we can't view a file that's been deleted. Okay, that should wrap us up. Thank you very much.